A teenage immigrant came to the United States to realize her dream of becoming a doctor. But a tragic twist of fate intervened when she found herself an innocent victim of the drug trade. Kidnapped and held captive, she survived for days against all odds. Authorities arrested her captors, but they refused to reveal her whereabouts. The FBI and local police raced against time, determined to save the teenager's life.
When a young woman was grabbed from her Texas home, the police raced to find her abductors. On the face of it, the kidnapping seemed like the random act of desperate men. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Before the FBI could find her, they first had to find a motive. Their investigation revealed a complex story of betrayal and revenge. At its center stood an innocent 16-year-old who found herself in the clutches of killers.
September 24th, 1994, Arlington, Texas. It was a Saturday night, and 16-year-old Lisa Renée was home studying. She wanted to make the most of her first semester in an American high school. She hoped to someday return to the Virgin Islands as a surgeon.
Who is it?
At 8 p.m., her concentration was suddenly shattered. Somehow, she knew not to answer the door. Instead, she called her sister Pearl.
What do you want?
Pearl told Lisa to call 911. She promised to come right home.
Arlington 911, what are you reporting? Who do they say that they're looking for?
Lisa said men were trying to break into her house, men who claimed to be FBI agents.
You have the wrong house. I'm sorry. Oh, they're the FBI. Oh, the door. They're the FBI. They said that. What's going on?
Ma'am.
The dispatcher heard the phone drop.
What's going on? Ma'am.
Then there was silence. Lisa never came back on the line. As Arlington, Texas police responded to the 911 call, Lisa disappeared into the night. The police had no way of knowing they were about to pass her on the street, or that a 16-year-old girl was now in mortal danger. Police were on the scene with Lisa's sister Pearl when Detective John Stanton arrived. As a veteran of the Arlington police force, he would lead the investigation.
From the initial 911 call, it sounded like a very serious kidnapping. It sounded to the 911 call takers that there was some foul play and some actual violence involved.
The detective needed to know everything, and quickly. The early hours of a kidnapping case are crucial. Pearl told the officers all she knew. She was at work when her sister Lisa called to say some men were trying to break into the apartment. She told Lisa to call 911, then hurried home. But she was too late. She found the sliding glass door smashed and Lisa gone.
For a 16-year-old to be physically dragged from a residence in Arlington is just, it's really kind of unspeakable.
Okay, now whose room is this?
Pearl told the detectives that her brothers, Neil and Stanfield, were also staying with her. They had been evicted from their own apartment for allegedly selling drugs. Pearl explained that her family was from the U.S. Virgin Islands. She and her brothers had come to America first. Lisa had joined them in time to start school. She was a straight-A student. Investigators processed the apartment, hoping to find a clue as to the abductors' identities. They found no prints far into the apartment. Perhaps the abductors were known to the family. The detective asked to talk to Pearl's brothers, but they were on their way back from a Houston music festival. The detective told Pearl to get them on the cell phone. They were 50 miles from the apartment when Detective Stanton reached them.
I understand what you're saying.
When I spoke to the brothers, I spoke with Stanfield initially. Stanfield told me that they don't know of anyone who would have wanted to abduct their sister. They owed no one money, that this was not about any sort of drug business. They weren't involved in anything involving drugs.
All right.
As much as Pearl Renée tried to help, the detective believed her brothers had the answers he was looking for. But without their help, he would have to identify Lisa's captors the hard way. As precious minutes slipped by, forensic technicians combed the apartment for additional clues. They collected glass from the broken sliding door and hair and fiber samples.
Also got books.
They dusted for fingerprints, only to conclude that the kidnappers had worn gloves. Even this small detail worried detectives. It suggested Lisa Renée was in the hands of experienced criminals. If Detective Stanton ever hoped to find Lisa alive, he knew he needed all the help he could get.
You have to use the resources available to you, and that includes additional manpower, the use of the FBI. You have to use everything that you have as a resource.
Special agents from the FBI's Fort Worth resident agency joined detectives at the scene. Special Agent Kenneth Bersano was concerned that the kidnappers had identified themselves as FBI agents.
As it turned out, there was no FBI agent there on the scene or any other joint investigation ongoing in that neighborhood.
Neighbors reported seeing 4 young African-American men hanging around the apartment complex prior to the abduction. They were wearing camouflage clothing and driving a champagne-colored Cadillac.
The atmosphere at the crime scene was tense. Lisa Renée's sister was very distraught that she wasn't there for her sister, and also residents in the complex were disturbed that a young lady could be abducted from an apartment complex so readily.
The fact that Lisa Renée was a minor and that her abductors had impersonated federal agents gave the FBI jurisdiction over the case. They would work in conjunction with local law enforcement.
Homicide, Stanton.
Detective Stanton worked through the night and into the morning.
Yeah, what's going on?
In the early hours of September 25th, he received a call from Lisa's brothers. They had found the champagne-colored Cadillac in nearby Irving, the same one residents had described at the complex.
It was an unusual tip. For the brothers to have just barely gotten into Arlington, to have had them drive mysteriously to a residence in Irving, Texas, which is some distance from Arlington, and in that same bit of circumstance, find a Cadillac fitting that general description, we thought was very curious.
They reported that the Cadillac was parked in front of a residence. If Lisa's brothers knew something more about their sister's abduction, they weren't telling police. Detective Stanton and Special Agent Bersano rushed to the residence in Irving. Irving police were already there. The sooner they found out where Lisa was being held, the better their chance of finding her alive. As Lisa's brothers had said, the Cadillac was parked out front.
I got a cold hood.
We touched the vehicle to see if the vehicle had been moved or had been in operation previously from the heat on the hood. We also looked inside the vehicle with our flashlights to see if there were any items that may have been left by the victim.
A woman answered the door.
We explained why we were there, that we were from the Arlington Police Department, from the FBI. We'd like to talk to her about the abduction of a young 16-year-old girl. We asked if we may just look around her home to see if the young lady that was abducted was in there.
The woman said she and her husband owned the Cadillac, but he wasn't home since he worked the night shift. She said she hadn't seen anyone who matched the description of the suspects. But she let investigators take a quick look around. They began in a child's room where her son was asleep. Nothing seemed suspicious. In another room, they awakened a woman sleeping in a double bed.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning.
It appeared she was alone.
Talked to Sandra. She told us we would look around. We're looking for somebody. Just sit tight.
In the hallway, investigators noticed stairs to an attic. One of the Irving officers climbed up and looked around.
There's a light up here.
He checked amidst the boxes and other items, but saw no one there.
I don't see anything up here.
We didn't have a real just cause to do an intensive search of the residence. We searched for, obviously, any sign that someone had been kidnapped, in places where someone could secrete a human body, just to be on the safe side.
Investigators left, still suspicious. But without a warrant, they were unable to do a more thorough search. Investigators turned their attention back to Lisa's brothers, Neil and Stanfield.
We felt that it was drug-related, and we told Neil and Stanfield that we're not interested in their current legal problems, but that we feel like Lisa's life may be at stake and that we need to have all the information that they can provide us to help get their sister back.
The day after the kidnapping, investigators again interviewed Neil and Stanfield. Despite their pending drug charges, Lisa's brothers finally came clean. They described a bogus drug deal that they'd taken part in a few days before.
What's up, man?
The brothers said that they had met with 2 men, but claimed they only knew the one named Steve.
9 pounds, right? Yeah.
Steve and his partner had given them $5,000 to score 9 pounds of marijuana.
How long it gonna take?
Neil and Stanfield promised they would return in an hour with the drugs, but they never
45
did.
minutes, right?
They now admitted they had never intended to deliver the marijuana. They just needed the money for attorney's fees because of their pending drug charges. Lisa's brothers said they didn't know how to contact Steve, but they knew someone who did. And that was all the brothers would say. The man who knew Steve was an inmate serving an 8-year sentence at the Tarrant County Jail. He revealed that Steve's full name was Stephen Beckley, a 19-year-old who worked detailing cars at a dealership in Irving, Texas.
West Wing Auto Shop, where's that at?
Investigators ran a computer check on Beckley. He had no outstanding warrants and no criminal history. As investigators continued to work the case, Lisa's sister, Pearl, did all she could to help. She hung up missing persons flyers and contacted local media, hoping someone might have seen Lisa. But the chance of finding her sister alive grew dimmer with each passing day. On September 24th, 1994, 16-year-old Lisa Renée was kidnapped from her Arlington, Texas apartment.
Who you want to speak? Who are you? I'm the FBI. Oh, they're the FBI. Open the door. No, we talk. They're the FBI. They said they're the FBI, ma'am. No! Ma'am? What's going on? Ma'am?
Just over 2 days had passed since Lisa's desperate call for help. Local police and the FBI were no closer to finding the missing girl. With time running out, the Arlington Police Department asked the public for help. Detective Stanton recalls the response was tremendous.
It was truly something that brought out the public and the public's fears about being abducted out of your own residence. It's sort of something that you're not expecting in a community like Arlington. It's not something that's ordinary. This doesn't happen here, I would say, ever in a town like ours.
On September 27th, the Arlington police detective received an unexpected visitor. He was the owner of the Irving, Texas home that police had searched in connection with a champagne-colored Cadillac. He was at work during the search, but had since heard the news of Lisa's disappearance and believed he had information that might be helpful. He said that the day before the kidnapping, he threw a barbecue since his wife's brothers were staying with him for a few days. The oldest brother, Orlando Hall, was involved with drugs. His younger brother, Demetrius Hall, shared the same interest. Their friend, Stephen Beckley, joined them.
When the husband told us that the Hall brothers were dressed in camouflage clothing, it made him know that after having heard the news stories, his brothers-in-law could very well be connected to the kidnapping case.
Something else had sparked the man's suspicions. One of his neighbors said she saw several young men drive up to the house in his Cadillac. At that time, he and his wife were out for dinner using a different car. But the Cadillac's keys were kept in the hall, so it was possible his wife's brothers had borrowed it. The man said he'd never trusted the Hall brothers.
Come here, you.
Both had served time in Arkansas on drug charges.
Come here, son. Come here. Come here.
And by visiting their sister in Irving, Texas, they were in violation of their parole.
No, you ain't right. Put it out. Whatever's right.
The man sensed they were up to something new, but didn't know what. He added that the Hall brothers were no longer staying at his house. On the night of the kidnapping, only Orlando had slept in the house, but he flew back to Arkansas early the next morning, planning to stay with friends in the town of El Dorado. The detective suspected Orlando had probably joined the others there. He contacted the El Dorado, Arkansas police. Investigators discovered that 19-year-old Demetrius Hall was on parole for possession of cocaine with intent to distribute. His older brother, Orlando Hall, was on parole for the same offense. His record also included arrests for aggravated assault and carrying a weapon.
When I spoke to the people in El Dorado, they were aware of the Hall family. In fact, they were providing to me information about the Hall brothers before I could even give them the information about the Hall brothers. They were well known to law enforcement in the community.
Later that day, investigators obtained a warrant to more thoroughly search the Irving, Texas home where the Hall brothers had been staying. They scoured the house for hair, fibers, blood, fingerprints, and anything else that might be connected to the crime. FBI Special Agent Garrett Floyd remembers their most significant discovery.
In the children's room.
we found a souvenir miniature baseball bat. When you pick up an item and you can see glass embedded in it, and you know that the sliding pane window was glass, then you make a decision on the spot, and you believe that evidence is a part of the crime scene.
Lab tests would determine whether his hunch was correct. In a storage container found in a bedroom closet, investigators discovered a green knit shirt with insulation fibers on it. They bagged it for further analysis. They also took samples of insulation fibers from the attic. Lab tests would later reveal that they matched the fibers on the shirt. A pair of camouflage pants was also found in the attic. Forensic technicians processed the champagne-colored Cadillac at the police impound lot. They found no fingerprints relevant to the case. They did discover a few small glass fragments inside the car, possibly from Lisa's sliding glass door. They sent the fragments to the lab for analysis. As they waited for the results, agents obtained arrest warrants for the Hall brothers and their friend Stephen Beckley, since they already had enough to establish probable cause. But they still hadn't found Lisa Renée. Agent Floyd continued to work around the clock, knowing that with each hour, they were less likely to find her alive.
We were very motivated in solving this case, in as much that we knew that time was critical. All of our efforts were focused on the recovery of the victim.
Investigators hoped they could pick up Lisa's trail, a trail that ended with broken glass. Technicians compared glass fragments from the car and those embedded in the baseball bat to shards collected from Lisa's home. At the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C., Supervisory Special Agent and Forensic Examiner Bruce Hall attempted to confirm that all the glass had come from the same sliding glass door. Technicians examined the glass embedded in the baseball bat. They tested the composition of the glass. It was consistent with the glass collected at Lisa's apartment. To confirm their results, they also tested its refractive index, the degree to which light bends as it passes through the sample.
After characterizing the glass recovered from the crime scene and characterizing the glass recovered from the baseball bat, I found that the glass on the baseball bat had the same refractive index and same composition as the glass at the crime scene. That led me to the conclusion that the glass on the baseball bat had originated from the crime scene.
The glass found in the Cadillac did not match. It was determined to have come from a window previously broken on the car. At the request of the FBI and Arlington, Texas police, El Dorado, Arkansas detectives tracked down the fugitives. They found 19-year-old Demetrius Hall at his father's house in El Dorado. He surrendered peacefully and was taken to the El Dorado jail. But he refused to say anything about Lisa's whereabouts. The search of the house revealed nothing. What investigators still didn't know was where Lisa was and whether she was dead or alive. 4.5 days after 16-year-old Lisa Renée was kidnapped from her sister's apartment in Arlington, Texas, investigators had tracked two abductors to El Dorado, Arkansas. One of the three suspects, Demetrius Hall, was in custody. Investigators continued to search for his older brother, Orlando, and a third man named Stephen Beckley. That afternoon, police found Stephen Beckley at a friend's house. The officers didn't even have to knock. Beckley came out and gave himself up. FBI agents and detectives from Arlington flew to El Dorado to interview the suspects. Stephen Beckley was initially uncooperative. He refused to say where Lisa Renée was or whether she was still alive.
I'm losing my patience with you right now.
Special Agent Garrett Floyd refused to give up.
Mr. Beckley advised that he did not know a whole lot of information concerning what was going on. After about an hour of talking to him, he looked at me and we developed somewhat of a relationship and we started to talk.
Beckley said that he and his friends had called in a fourth man named Bruce Webster to help them exact their revenge on Lisa Renée's brothers. Webster was a convicted felon and had a violent reputation as a hitman. Their plan was to douse Lisa Renée's brothers in gasoline and ignite it if they didn't turn over the drugs or the money as they had promised. When the men arrived at Lisa Renée's apartment, her brothers were not home. Unwilling to leave empty-handed, they kidnapped her instead. Beckley said that he and the other three took Lisa to the house in Irving, Texas, where Demetrius and Orlando were staying. They transferred the teenage girl from the Cadillac to Beckley's Ford Escort.
Get off the car.
Stephen Beckley, Bruce Webster, and 19-year-old Demetrius Hall drove her to Arkansas. Orlando Hall stayed behind and hid in his sister's attic. Detective Stanton was frustrated. Police had been within a few feet of Orlando Hall and missed him.
It wasn't until later that we learned, after we had taken some people into custody, that Orlando had been indeed hiding in the attic insulation while we were downstairs talking to the lady of the house.
Beckley said that during the 4-hour drive to Arkansas, he and the other two had taken turns raping Lisa Renée. When they arrived in Arkansas that night, Webster booked a motel room in Pine Bluff. Lisa was kept bound and gagged in the bathroom.
I'm trying to find her.
Agents pushed Beckley to tell them if the girl was still alive and where she was. Every minute counted if they were to save her life. But Beckley wouldn't say. He claimed he was afraid to talk as long as Bruce Webster was on the loose.
In his mind, he thought, believed, knew that Bruce Webster would kill him or anyone else if they ever divulged the information of what had occurred to Lisa Renée. That's the fear that Bruce Webster had instilled in the individuals as part of his kidnapping.
If I say a word...
Beckley did tell investigators where to look for Webster. The ex-convict might still be at the motel in Pine Bluff where they had held Lisa Renée 4 days ago. Investigators headed to the motel to confront a man Beckley had described as a violent hitman. Pine Bluff was 90 miles from El Dorado. Agents spoke with the manager to confirm Beckley's story. They hoped they would find Webster there, as well as Lisa Renée.
Upon interviewing the innkeeper, we were able to determine that Bruce Webster had registered at that inn, and that during the time he was registering, a young lady attempted to get out of the car, and that Bruce turned to the other occupants in the car and says, "Put the bitch back in the car." Bruce Webster and his companions then drove to the back of the property and went into the room.
The manager also remembered seeing 2 other black males in the car, but she couldn't make out their faces.
Nobody said anything last
She showed investigators the registration log for September 25th. Webster had been in room 513. The room was rented and cleaned several times after the men checked out. Chances of finding any useful evidence were slim. An FBI emergency response team was called in. The agent and detective continued to interview Beckley. They asked him for details of what went on in the room, hoping he would break down and tell them where Lisa was now.
Once we got Mr. Beckley to this Pine Bluff Motel, the urgency was there in that we thought that she was still alive because Mr. Beckley assured us the last time he saw her, she was alive and she was at this inn.
Okay.
Beckley told police that the men had raped Lisa repeatedly in the bathroom. Otherwise, they had kept her hooded with a paper bag over her head. During their second night at the motel, the kidnappers were nearly discovered. A security guard knocked at the door.
The innkeeper asked that their on-residence security guard who lived there check the room to see if everything was all right. The security guard did check the room and did not see Lisa Renée within the room. Stephen Beckley advised that had he seen her, that they were going to kill the security guard.
Beckley and the others were afraid that the guard might return. The motel was no longer a safe place to hide. As the kidnapper told his story, forensic technicians worked to confirm that Lisa had in fact been in the room. But after hours of painstaking work, they still had no evidence that Lisa had been there or that she was still alive. 6 days after 16-year-old Lisa Renée was kidnapped from her Arlington, Texas apartment, the FBI was no closer to finding her or two remaining suspects. Although investigators had found no evidence to indicate that Lisa had been in a Pine Bluff motel room, confessed kidnapper Stephen Beckley assured them she had. Forensic technician Joel Stevenson of the Arlington, Texas Police Department was determined to find something that would corroborate Beckley's story.
We went in knowing that possibly sexual assaults had occurred in that motel room, multiple sexual assaults. We went into the motel room looking for body fluids that may tie the suspects to the motel room or Lisa to the motel room.
If Lisa and her kidnappers had left behind any evidence, it appeared to have been destroyed by the motel's housekeepers. The technicians didn't give up. They continued their meticulous search for hairs, fibers, and fingerprints. Finally, their persistence paid off.
It wasn't until we got into the bathroom and the wall behind the toilet is where we located the palm prints and fingerprints that were ultimately identified as belonging to Lisa Renée. So the palm print itself, placing Lisa with them in that same motel room, was very important. It was a very critical piece of putting her with them.
Investigators now had evidence that Lisa was alive 4 days earlier, the day Beckley and the others had checked in. As agents drove the kidnapper 90 miles back to the El Dorado jail, they pressed Beckley for more details. He admitted that after Orlando Hall had joined them in Pine Bluff, they decided to move Lisa to another motel nearby in order to avoid a second visit by the security guard. After a couple of days in that motel, the men grew increasingly concerned about getting caught. They came up with a plan to dispose of the girl. Demetrius Hall stayed behind to wipe the room clean, while the other three loaded her into Webster's car and headed for a rural area. Beckley told investigators that Bruce Webster and Orlando Hall had dug a grave in a nature preserve near the motel. They took Lisa there to kill her. But in the dark, overgrown park, the three men couldn't find the burial site. After an hour, they took her back to the motel. The next morning, they searched for the gravesite again. While forensic technicians scoured the second motel room for clues, investigators pressured Beckley to tell them what happened next. Special Agent Garrett Floyd recalls that Beckley refused, still afraid that Webster might seek retribution.
We were pressed for time because the clock was still ticking. We were hoping against hope that she was still alive. And so with this in mind, agents as well as police officers who had not slept in 2 or 3 days were up searching, looking, hoping that she was still alive.
Then, investigators got the call they'd been hoping for. The FBI emergency response team, working at the second motel, had spotted Bruce Webster pull up in his car. The suspected kidnapper had returned to the motel with a young woman, but she was not Lisa Renée. A brief interview revealed she was not connected to the crime in any way.
You're not in any trouble. It's going to be okay, okay? Just let me call him.
He had driven up into the parking lot. Our officers and the FBI agents confronted him. He identified himself as Bruce Webster, gave date of birth information. He was carrying a small baggie of what appeared to be marijuana in his pocket. He was asked if we could search his vehicle. He allowed the officers to search his vehicle that he'd driven up in.
Inside the vehicle, agents found 2 handguns. They charged Webster with possession of the guns and the marijuana and took him to the Garland County Jail in Hot Springs, Arkansas. The car was processed for other evidence. They found no trace of the missing girl.
And when they radioed us and told us he was in custody, we, myself, and Detective Ford went back and interviewed Bruce Webster. He stated that he didn't know anything. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was simply coming back to his motel room.
As Agent Floyd continued to pressure Webster for answers, the last of the fugitives, Orlando Hall, turned himself in.
Orlando Hall had apparently seen the news that these arrests had been made, found out, of course, that his brother had been taken into custody. He surrendered to the Pine Bluff Police Department.
With all 4 suspects now in custody, agents hoped that one of them would reveal where investigators could find Lisa Renée. The interview with Bruce Webster, the man who had been hired to do the killing, continued into the night, but he said little. Agent Floyd believed Webster had the answers they were looking for.
Basically, the only information Mr. Webster provided was his name, the fact that he hadn't done anything, and the fact that he wanted to go to sleep. To him, it was nothing. She was nothing.
Agents' hope of finding Lisa alive was fading. They needed to get one of the suspects to talk, and they needed to do it fast. Six days after a young woman was abducted from her Arlington, Texas apartment, investigators pressed her suspected kidnappers for information. Until now, alleged hitman Bruce Webster had stonewalled investigators. But Special Agent Garrett Floyd's persistence eventually paid off. Webster finally admitted that Lisa was dead.
It felt like a tremendous sledgehammer falling on you. We had tracked this young lady from Arlington, Texas to Pine Bluff, Arkansas, over 200 miles, with the one hope of finding her alive. And we did not. It was as if all of the wind and all of the energy had gone out of us.
Webster picked up the story where his accomplice Stephen Beckley left off. When they returned to the park with Lisa, they located the grave they had dug the day before. Detective John Stanton's fears had been realized.
The reality of it set in at that point that we were not going to find her alive. We were not going to be able to save her. We were going to be too late.
Stand by the car. Watch
Webster said that only 2 of his accomplices, Orlando Hall and Stephen Beckley, took Lisa back to the park. The 4th kidnapper, Demetrius Hall, had stayed behind to clean the motel room and wipe away fingerprints. The suspected hitman claimed he wasn't actually with the others when they killed the girl. Webster said he returned to the car to act as the lookout. From the car, the grave was too far away to have seen the murder. Now that Webster was safely in custody, the agents decided to see if Beckley would corroborate his story. Agent Floyd felt that Beckley knew far more than he had said.
And he looked at me and he said, "You know I didn't tell you everything. You know I've lied." And I said, "Yes, I know you did not tell me everything. You didn't lie, but you didn't tell me everything." And he said, "You're right." So then Stephen Beckley started crying. And Stephen Beckley told me she was dead, that she was buried in these woods, and that we needed to go get her. And I said, "We will go get her. Let's get your story on paper, and we will go and find her."
Crazy, man. He's a hitman.
Beckley said that despite Bruce Webster's story, the hitman had indeed been involved in the killing.
He told us a story that the grave was 6 foot deep, and that when she went to the grave, when she, Bruce Webster, Orlando Hall, and he, Stephen Beckley, arrived at the grave, that she saw the grave, and that she started to run in the effort to get away. And that they struck at her with a shovel and placed a mark in this tree. That he, Beckley, became concerned and was afraid and ran back up to the street to check to see if the way was clear, as he was instructed to by Bruce Webster. By the time he came back, they were burying her.
What you asked for?
Beckley told investigators that the men then met Demetrius back at the motel, showered, and left. They gave their dirty clothes to Webster, who burned them in the park, along with Lisa's blood-stained outfit. Webster stayed in Pine Bluff with Orlando Hall, while the other two returned to El Dorado. The agent re-interviewed Webster, hoping Beckley's confession would give him some leverage. The agent told him that Beckley had placed him at the murder scene and named the park where the body was buried.
He stated that he didn't know anything about anything. The last thing that I told him was, "Everyone else has told me what has occurred. Why won't you?" And he said, "They're family, aren't they?" And I said, "Yep, the family has turned on you." He said, "Open that book. Let me tell you what happened."
The hitman now confessed that he was, in fact, at the murder scene. He admitted that he had dug the grave, and he offered to show it to the agent.
So in the middle of the night, we drove back to Pine Bluff and told him I need as many flashlights and officers and agents available, that we were going to find her tonight.
Webster showed investigators the area of the park where the body was buried. They searched for evidence to corroborate the suspect's stories. By morning, they found the gravesite. They began to process the area and exhume the body. The site was as the hitman had described it, right down to a damaged tree near the grave.
And we removed a section of that tree because it was evidence that the shovel that they were hitting her with had actually missed on one of their swings and hit the tree. So we used that tree as a part of the evidence.
Unearthing the body was a time-consuming and heartbreaking process. Besides digging, investigators sifted through leaves and dirt, searching for anything that might help tie the suspects to the crime. Joel Stevenson of the Arlington, Texas Police recalls the moment when their hard work finally paid off.
We made contact with Lisa's body approximately 2 feet down from the surface, the outer surface of the dirt, and then started uncovering her and really excavating around the body from that point on down to the 4 feet level. This lasted for about 5.5 hours. It took us to fully extract her from the gravesite.
When they reached the dead woman's body, it was an emotional moment for investigators who wanted so desperately to save Lisa Renée.
During the time we were exhuming her body, one of the agents on the evidence response team accidentally scrapes her knee. The agent breaks down, and I break down, because we know now that she's dead. This week that we have spent trying to locate her has resulted in the recovery of her, but not the recovery of her in that she was not alive.
The coroner removed Lisa's body to the Arkansas State Lab in Little Rock, where an autopsy was performed. She had ligature marks on her arms, defensive wounds on her hands, bruises over much of her body, and deep lacerations to the back of her head. But the cause of death was determined to be suffocation, coupled with blunt force trauma to the head. The coroner believed Lisa's attackers knocked her unconscious with a shovel and then buried her alive.
When you find out that you were that close to possibly saving this kidnapped victim from her demise, as it turned out, it hurts in that you wish you could kind of go back in time and do something different than you did. But under the conditions that we had and the information we had to work with, we felt like we did as good as we could. Unfortunately, it wasn't good enough to save Lisa.
The 4 kidnappers were tried soon after her body was found. Demetrius Hall became a witness for the state and accepted a plea bargain of 25 years. Stephen Beckley did the same and got 30 years. Orlando Hall received the death penalty for interstate kidnapping resulting in death. A few months later, Bruce Webster received the same sentence. Both were sent to death row at the U.S. Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. The trials were little consolation to Lisa's sister Pearl, who could barely absorb the fact that the bright teenager would never realize her dream of becoming a surgeon.
I thought I'd feel better, but I really don't. Because, I mean, it's not going to bring her back. The only thing that's going to make it better is Lisa was here today, and she's not coming back.
For Arlington Police Detective John Stanton, Lisa Renée's murder had disturbing implications.
It just solidified the fact that things can happen to people who are completely and totally unrelated to criminal activities. No one is exempt from the possibility that, for no real reason of their own, they get put in a position where their life is in jeopardy. And Lisa Renée is a prime example of someone that, in the years that I've been doing this, she is actually probably the most innocent victim that I've ever worked a case on. And it's something that we'd all need to remember, that even if you're an innocent victim, you can still be a victim.
For Special Agent Garrett Floyd and investigators alike, the case was personal.
I have a daughter who's approximately the same age as Lisa Renée. And to believe that someone could take a child, a young lady, and do the things that they did to her and then kill her without any respect for life takes that father image in me to a different level. because we love our children. And we know that we will have to take care and keep them out of harm's way. And on a Saturday night, if my daughter's doing homework and I happen to run to the store, they could break in my house and take my daughter and do the same thing.
In Detroit, a brutal gang strikes again and again, targeting residents in terrifying home invasions. They attack quickly, take what they want, and leave no evidence behind. As the assaults continue, the FBI and local police join forces to stop the terror. In the end, authorities come face to face with a vicious gang that refuses to be taken alive.
In the 1990s, neighborhoods in Detroit were terrorized by a gang of robbers. Impersonating police officers, they invaded over 100 homes, robbing, raping, and torturing their victims. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The extraordinary number and sheer magnitude of these home invasions stunned authorities. As residents feared for their lives, agents teamed up with local police to take down this sadistic gang.
Detroit, Michigan, February 1994. In some neighborhoods, narcotics trafficking is a way of life, and drug busts by the local police are routine. This raid is anything but routine. The men ask the resident where he keeps his drugs and money. He refuses to talk, confident that police officers would never hurt him.
You're the police, you can't shoot me. Hurry up, yo! Hurry up! Wait, I got it. Yo, hurry up, let's go! Hurry up! We got it! Hurry up! We got it! Come on, man, let's go!
The man calls police and reports that officers broke into his home, assaulted him, then stole money and jewelry. The patrolmen know the resident is a local narcotics dealer. They also know there were no drug raids scheduled for that address. Could these home invaders be rogue cops? The incident is part of a wave of excessively violent home invasions plaguing Detroit.
Give it up! I don't want to have to hurt you, old woman!
Averaging more than one a week, they spread fear throughout the city.
Give it up!
The invaders leave no useful evidence behind. In June 1994, the newly formed Safe Streets Violent Crimes Task Force dedicates itself to putting an end to the terror. It is comprised of Detroit police detectives and FBI agents, including Special Agent Michael Kosanovich.
We really were determined to solve these violent home invasions. Initially, we were aware of approximately 50 home invasion robberies from the beginning of '94 up through June of '94. They were fairly violent. They involved shootings, sexual assaults.
Investigators begin by searching for connections between the numerous invasions. Detroit police officer Tom Dunai.
We took a look at all the police reports that were taken over the previous 2 or 3 months. We analyzed them, we broke them down into the MOs and exactly what these perpetrators were doing on each one.
Investigators identify a recurring method used in the attacks, according to Special Agent Bob Pertuso.
The gang used a dynamic approach that law enforcement officers use when they execute a search warrant or make an arrest to gain quick entry into a home and then take control of the occupants. They all wore masks, and they were all armed with semi-automatic pistols, assault rifles, MAC-10s.
Based on this consistent MO, the task force suspects that a single group is committing most of the invasions.
We were able to narrow this down to, yes, it was a gang of about anywhere from 4 to 8. The descriptions all fit the same. Their MO was the same. Everything was the same on almost every home invasion.
To gather more first-hand information, investigators re-interview the victims of the home invasions.
Stan, you had some excitement here the other day.
They learn that most of them are involved in narcotics trafficking. FBI Special Agent Michael Kosanovich is not surprised that dealers are reluctant to talk.
They don't want to reveal the fact that they were selling drugs or conducting illegal activity out of that residence.
Detective Sergeant Tom Barry tells the dealers that the task force has no interest in busting them for narcotics.
People are getting raped, they're violent. We don't care about the drugs. We need your cooperation. About 90% of the time, the drug guy come on board, you come on our team and say, hey, I deal my drugs, I know that's not right, I'll tell you what I know about this case.
Holds a gun at me and I'm like, he's a cop, you know.
Investigators discover that some home invasion victims are not drug dealers.
These sometimes elderly people, they're panicking, they're crying, they're begging. Got guns to the side of their head. Where's the dope? Where's the money? Where's the dope? Where's the money? There isn't any money. There isn't any dope.
The gang has simply hit the wrong house. Realizing that there are no drugs or money, they turn violent.
Did they ask you?
We heard all the horrible stories of the torture, 80-year-old women, pistol whipped, hit with the butts of shotguns.
FBI Special Agent Martin Vandervliet.
What really bothered us the most were the sexual assaults of the females who were present on 6 of the home invasions. One in particular, a mother and her 15-year-old daughter were raped simultaneously by 2 members of the home invasion group.
Just the look in their eyes, the fear, their anger that was very controlled, but yet was all inside their body. You could just feel it with their body emotions.
I'm so sorry.
The little girl, without saying it, just through her eyes, she said, please help us. Please help us. And that hit me. And that look in that girl's eyes will stay with me for the rest of my life. We told her that we would do anything in our power to bring these guys to justice. What I had to do is build their confidence up, leave phone calls every day to let them know that I'm still thinking about them, we didn't forget about anything, and we're on your side and you're well protected and you have nothing to worry about. The fright that was in them will always be there, but they knew they had the full cooperation of the Violent Crime Task Force on their side.
Skinny.
Concerned that the home invasions are executed like a police raid, the task force confronts the possibility the gang is made up of law enforcement personnel.
We checked to see any recent officers that have been fired from the job, maybe were accused of illegal use of narcotics, because this was all revolved around narcotics, you know. So you would check, you know, any ex-narcotic officers, and there was nothing.
Investigators quickly recognize that the escalating level of violence in these cases indicates that law enforcement is probably not involved.
In our experience, police officers aren't going to go that extra step and fire shots into a house or go rape a victim, things of that nature. It's usually go in and rob, go in and knock the door down, get their whatever they need and run out. So in the beginning, we had to look at that, but then we had to eliminate that as the more and more as the home invasions were occurring. It got more and more violent. We realized that it wasn't police officers or ex-police officers.
The biggest problem with these subjects acting as police when they committed these home invasions was that they jeopardized legitimate police officers. If a victim has been robbed before by this gang, and then the police show up another time to execute a search warrant legitimately, they may start shooting or try to harm the police officers.
So what we need to do is start going through.
Now that investigators have a clearer idea of what they are dealing with, they begin their efforts to identify the members of the gang.
We looked at a number of people who had committed these offenses in the past, or robbery-type offenses of narcotics dealers. We contacted various informants and asked them to try and determine the identities of these individuals. However, none of the informants that we had talked to had any specific information regarding the people who were committing these offenses.
A couple of hours ago.
Over the next month, the home invasions continue, but the task force makes little progress.
Every home invasion in the city of Detroit, where people went in posing as officers, we, the Violent Crime Task Force, would respond to it. So we got first-hand information, try to get a feel, are these our guys, are these not our guys, why are they or why are they not?
Investigators carefully process each scene, but can find no evidence.
Everything we did, we weren't getting lucky. We needed a break.
July 26, 1994. Nearly 2 months after the investigation began. Detroit police respond to a call about shots fired. They find a barely conscious man with multiple gunshot wounds. He has a gun, police jacket, bulletproof vest, and a ski mask. The clothing matches descriptions of home invaders given by prior victims. Police call for an ambulance. Officers alert the task force. This could be the break they need.
Here's a guy, he's got a gun on him, he's got a police vest on. And my only hope at the time was, please don't die. Please don't die.
Agents rush to the hospital, hoping the man pulls through. In Detroit, a joint FBI and police task force tackles an epidemic of violent home invasions perpetrated by an elusive gang who uses police-style tactics. Authorities get a break when they find and arrest a critically wounded man who they believe is part of the ring. FBI agents go to the hospital to question the suspect. Fingerprint identification reveals that his name is Dante Garrison. FBI Special Agent Martin Vandervliet.
He was in pretty bad shape at the time, having been shot 3 times in the arm, the leg, and stomach. He said he was aware of some robberies which had occurred, but he didn't want to go into specifics at that time.
Special Agent Michael Kosanovich remains hopeful.
We were encouraged by the situation, by our analysis of his emotional status, and the fact that we felt he's probably at some point going to cooperate if we can work this right, if we can talk to him and reason with him.
At Detroit Police Headquarters, the task force discusses strategies for persuading Garrison to cooperate. When the suspect's name comes up, Detroit officer Al Page recognizes it. He says he knows his family, and it even once held Garrison when he was a baby. To Detective Sergeant Tom Berry, this is an extraordinary stroke of luck.
Now, what are the odds of that? So not only did he get shot and didn't die, we got one of our officers that knows him. This couldn't be any better.
Investigators return to the hospital, and Officer Page exploits his relationship with the suspect's family, hoping to cajole Garrison into cooperating. The ploy works. Garrison agrees to talk in exchange for immunity from prosecution. He admits that he is in fact a member of the home invasion gang and explains that his shooting was the result of an invasion that went terribly wrong.
One of the occupants of the residence had seen them, said something, and they had fled. They believed that they could come back and successfully commit the home invasion the next night. However, the occupants of that residence were ready and waiting for them.
The gang fled, leaving the wounded Garrison to fend for himself. Special Agent Bob Pertuso.
And that was the difference between these criminals and law enforcement. A law enforcement officer would not leave a fellow officer shot in some backyard.
Knowing Garrison is in poor physical shape, the task force keeps the interview short. They need to keep him healthy.
He was eventually moved out of the hospital and allowed to recuperate at home. Once he became capable of moving around without any assistance, it was decided that we should take him to an off-site location to have him fully debriefed.
The FBI secretly moves Garrison to a safe house outside of Detroit. Investigators inform him of the potential consequences of cooperating with the task force, according to Detroit police officer Tom Dunai.
We let him know that there is a real risk of him losing his life if these guys ever found out that he's talking with authorities about what has occurred. And he wanted protection to make sure nothing would happen to him, and naturally we gave that protection to him and let him know his name wouldn't be brought up until the day of court.
The way it worked was
during intensive interviews, Garrison reveals that the gang has several more members than previously suspected.
As it turned out, it wasn't the same group of individuals who were committing these home invasions every time. It might be from 3 to 10 members. And it really depended on who was available when the call went out, who could respond to commit that home invasion that evening. If they were available, they would go. And if they needed money, they would go. If they didn't need money, maybe they might stay home that night.
He's like,
Garrison divulges that 2 career criminals control the gang. O.B. Carter and Andre Woods.
O.B. and Andre Woods directed and determined which targets would be hit and which individuals would go on specific home invasions. Once a residence was targeted for a home invasion, O.B. Carter would page all the gang members that were going to be involved that night. A few of the members would go out and conduct some surveillance on that location. They would try and identify residents, how many, ages. They would return back to the gang, debrief everyone, and then meet again later that night to actually conduct the home invasion.
Garrison reveals that Andre Woods actually stages mock-up raids for training purposes.
Andre Woods had taken the gang members to vacant houses to practice police-style raids, so that they would be familiar with techniques as far as how to make entry into the residence. They would enter just as the police would enter to secure it.
Once the residents are neutralized, the gang interrogates the victims.
You make them pay.
According to Garrison, Woods is extremely violent. He rapes some of his victims and tortures drug dealers when they won't talk.
A lot of times, if the victims would not tell them where the money or the drugs were, they would physically beat them or shoot them until they were willing to provide that information.
Garrison describes one home invasion in which the gang tortured an elderly drug dealer.
They put the guns to him. Where's the dope? Where's the money? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. They shot him in the leg. And he's in agonizing pain, and they're just hammering him again. And they didn't want to kill him. They wanted him to tell them where the drugs and the money was. Shot him again in the leg and said, "Hey, MFer, where's the drugs? We know you got the drugs. We know it's here. Where's it at? Give us, or you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die." And they shot him again. They told him where it was at. Got their money, got their drugs, and they're on their way.
Once a home invasion was complete, they would return to the predetermined location. The money would be divided evenly among the members. Any valuables that someone was able to pick up, it was theirs to keep.
Gang member and drug dealer Chris Allen would handle the stolen narcotics.
Oh, this is prime weed.
It was Chris Allen's responsibility to take those drugs out on the street, sell them, get the money for those drugs, and divide it evenly among the members.
It is also Allen who would suggest who to target for their home invasions.
Allen provided a lot of intelligence to the gang members as far as who would be good people to rob. Based on his knowledge of their narcotics dealing, he knew that they either would have drugs or money present when the gang went in.
Agents are impressed by Garrison's detailed recollection of past crimes.
We knew that this was the jewel. He was the break that we needed to make a significant impact on all these home invasion robberies.
Although Garrison's cooperation is critical to the investigation, it is unlikely that his testimony would stand up in court.
It would just be his word against theirs, and that would not be sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these individuals were guilty of these crimes. We needed admissions from these people, or we needed to catch them in the act of committing a home invasion to be certain that they would be locked up.
Authorities must hit the streets and find a way to take down this violent gang. Detroit police and the FBI work to shut down a dangerous home invasion gang. They get a major break when a gang member is found shot and begins cooperating with the investigation.
Those are all the names I know.
You know where they hang out? What neighborhoods they live in?
Nah, man, they wasn't like my boy.
A joint FBI police task force begins using the informant's information to identify more gang members, according to Special Agent Martin Vanderfleet.
A lot of them had criminal histories that matched up with what was occurring. We felt they were likely involved in this based on that. And we went out and did physical surveillance of their residences and could see that they were associating with other members of the group.
Although investigators have received detailed information about the gang's infrastructure from their cooperating witness, the task force needs more evidence to build their case. Authorities show photo lineups of the suspects to the gang's victims, hoping they can identify their attackers.
Take your time.
Detective Sergeant Tom Berry.
The bad thing that we ran into is the victims could not identify them. They were in masks. Everything went by in a flash. They put them down on the floor. They could not identify them.
Another set.
The inability of witnesses to pick out their attackers hurts the case.
Take your time.
Special Agent Michael Kusanovich.
No. We don't have enough information to conduct search warrants, to make any arrests. All we have is one individual who's providing information. What we're now looking for is additional fresh information to allow us to go further in the investigation.
The task force asks a federal judge for permission to use wiretaps. If they can prove that there is an ongoing pattern of felonies by the gang, they can take down the entire organization on federal racketeering charges.
And apparently he's also one who has trained gangs.
A few days later, in the early morning hours of September 4th, 1994, police respond to a report of shots fired at an illegal after-hours gambling house. It is owned by Andre Woods, one of the gang's leaders. They interview witnesses and piece together what happened. At 4:30 in the morning, Andre Woods got into an argument with a few of the gamblers.
It got out of hand. He didn't like, they disrespected him. Gunned him down, cold blood. Just wiped out, 4 human lives in a second. He just kind of walked out. That's just the way he was. Got in his Mercedes-Benz and took off.
The task force provides Detroit Homicide with information on Woods and his car. Homicide detectives use the information to alert law enforcement nationwide in an all-out effort to find the fugitive.
Obviously, this caused us to try and speed up our efforts to obtain these wiretaps because we had demonstrated to us the propensity for extreme violence. if Woods was willing to commit a quadruple homicide, we felt that they wouldn't be afraid to commit homicides if necessary in the commission of the home invasions.
5 days after the quadruple homicide, a judge grants the task force permission to monitor the pagers of several of the gang members. They begin collecting phone numbers and discover a consistent pattern of calls between them. It shows further evidence of the gang's organization. A week later, the unimaginable happens. Fugitive Andre Woods strolls into Detroit Police Headquarters.
Ray walked in and said, "Hey, I hear you guys are looking for me."
Police believe Woods turned himself in because the manhunt was getting too hot. He thought it would be easier to fight the charges in court. FBI Special Agent Bob Pertuso is glad to have Woods off the streets.
Because he was so violent. He was an enforcer for the gang. And if Woods was still out, there was a great potential for more people to get hurt.
A week after Andre Woods surrenders, the task force uses the evidence from the pagers to get its first telephone wiretap on the remaining gang leader, O.B. Carter.
We were hoping to be able to identify past home invasions, proceeds of those robberies, and most of all, identify future home invasions so that we could prevent them or catch these individuals in the act.
The task force also places Carter under surveillance by a Detroit police crew that includes Officer Steve Miller.
The guy was really surveillance conscious, so it was a pretty hard target to follow, but we were able to follow him.
The information gathered through surveillance, combined with the evidence from the wiretap, gives investigators further insight into the gang's activities.
We were able to start to watch their moves and start to anticipate as opposed to react. Anticipate where they were going to strike and which members were going to be involved in the next home invasion.
Monitoring phone conversations, they learned to recognize gang members' voices and code words. The gang calls their home invasions licks. Detroit police officer Tom Dunai.
After we kind of knew that they had just got done with a lick, they all get on the phone and start talking about it and laughing about it and telling how much money they got out of a certain house or how many guns they got out of a certain house. Then they would talk about narcotics that they got out of the house.
From these intercepted details of the crimes, investigators are able to connect the gang to specific home invasions.
They weren't very descriptive, but they were descriptive enough where we knew what they were talking about, what they got out of the house. So we were able to match that up with the reports of the victims stating to us what was taken from the house at the time of the home invasion.
But it is still not enough.
We didn't know specifically which individuals in that group had committed the home invasions. We still needed more information, and we really wanted to catch them in the act of committing a home invasion.
One night, a surveillance officer is watching a home where gang members are meeting. Suddenly, an unmarked Detroit police car pulls up. Before surveillance can radio a warning, 4 plainclothes officers jump out and head in the direction of the gang house. Dispatch tells surveillance that the 4 are working on another case, looking for a possible fugitive at the house next door. The officer is worried that the violent gang members don't know it. A Detroit plainclothes arrest team approaches a house, unaware that a vicious gang, armed with automatic weapons, is in the house next door.
Yo, fellas, cops! Get ready.
An officer assigned to surveil the gang watches anxiously, not knowing if the gang will think the officers are coming for them and open fire. After a few tense moments, the officer is relieved to see no indication of a gang response.
Go ahead, play cards, man. Go ahead, man. Take your time.
later, the joint FBI police task force investigating the gang monitors a wiretap on a gang leader's home. Detroit Police Detective Sergeant Tom Berry learns the gang did in fact know the arrest team was outside.
Apparently they were getting ready to do a home invasion, and a police car pulled up. Home invaders don't know why these cops are out there. They thought they were coming after them. On the wire, what they said is that those cops would have came in here, we would have killed them, just killed them all. That made the hair on our arms stand up.
Detroit police officer Tom Dunai is even more determined to get the gang off the streets as soon as possible.
We started getting enough evidence on these guys via the wiretap that we decided that before somebody actually gets killed here, we need to do something quickly.
But investigators need direct evidence of the gang committing a crime to ensure convictions under federal racketeering statutes.
Taking care of the warrants?
Special Agent Bob Pertuso.
Okay, great.
They would be in possession of their weapons, they'd be wearing their bulletproof vests, they'd be in possession of the goods that they stole.
To protect innocent bystanders, investigators decide to arrest the gang after they leave a home invasion. Special Agent Martin Vandervliet.
We know they're going to be...
We did not want to try and arrest them while they were in the house committing a home invasion and possibly risk a hostage situation.
But taking down this brutal gang will be extremely dangerous.
They had attempted to kill people, rob people, sexually assaulted women. Very violent. In fact, we had developed that information that they had planned to shoot it out with the police when confronted. Very difficult situation.
We know they're going to have vests on. We know they're going to have automatic weapons. There was no doubt in our minds that these people, they weren't going to just throw up their hands and give up. They're going to shoot it out.
You going with me out here for a minute?
Because of the large number of individuals who were involved, as well as the weapons that they were carrying, they were heavily armed with AK-47s, MAC-10s, Uzis, all the dangerous weapons out there in the street. We believed that we needed to use a SWAT team to arrest these individuals.
Agents meet with the SWAT commander who lays out the plan. The tactical squad responsible for making the arrests will hide inside an ambulance.
And be taken down immediately.
With its emergency lights activated, the ambulance will approach the home invader's vehicle from behind as if it were passing. Investigators believe that since the gang will have just committed a home invasion, they will try to remain inconspicuous and pull to the side of the road.
And we're going to ram them with the ambulance. The 20 SWAT guys, all dressed in SWAT gear with bulletproof vests, are going to get out and get a half moon around them. So when they start to get out of the car or the van, we got them contained. We didn't want to get into a chase. That was one of our things we didn't want. And that's why we decided to ram them, disable their vehicle. We didn't want to chase.
The final component of the plan requires taking down the rest of the organization.
We knew from past experience that only certain members of that group would be involved. It wouldn't be the whole group. So we had other police persons ready to make arrests at other locations for whoever was not present during that home invasion, as well as to execute 6 search warrants. We had hundreds of agents and police officers involved in our plans for the takedown of this group.
For weeks, the task force works around the clock, monitoring wiretaps, looking for the right opportunity to spring their trap. Then, on November 9th, they hear gang members planning their next home invasion.
When we intercepted conversations about a plan to do it in 2 days, we were at a great tactical advantage. We had our federal search warrant signed, we had the assignments to conduct the searches, and of course the tactical people were actually going to handle the arrest.
Unfortunately, gang members don't mention where the home invasion will be.
We don't know where yet.
The next day, surveillance watches 2 gang members drive through a neighborhood as though scouting for a potential target. The task force now believes they know approximately where the home invaders will strike. Police headquarters, November 11th. With the home invasion only hours away,
Deadly serious.
The task force goes over the plan with team leaders one final time.
Their intent
To underscore the danger the officers face, they play a tape recording of the gang's threat to kill police.
We played that tape for the people who are going to take these people down later on. This is the real deal. We're not playing with these people. These people aren't playing with you. They have no hesitation of killing a police officer. And you can just see the officers just intently staring. This is real. These guys are going to kill us.
At this point, we had been investigating this group for several months, and it was a relatively long-term investigation. And I think most of us on the task force wanted to conclude it, wanted to get them arrested. So we were pretty excited. I think the adrenaline level was pretty high, and we really were expecting that this was going to be the conclusion. One way or another, we were going to get these people locked up that evening.
SWAT gives Officer Steve Miller and the rest of the surveillance teams armor-piercing ammunition for their handguns in case the takedown becomes a gunfight.
We knew these guys wore the same kind of armor we wore, you know, exact same stuff in there, and we knew that they were shooting armor-piercing rounds out of their weapons. So, you know, we had to try to at least be on level par with them.
That evening, surveillance observes the home invaders traveling in 2 cars.
They drive to the area they drove the day before. Everybody's tightening up. They drive by the house and they leave. Well, they don't do the robbery. So we're thinking, what the heck's going on?
FBI Special Agent Martin Vandervliet follows the gang from a distance.
We didn't want to get too close because we didn't want to risk these individuals seeing police in the area and possibly aborting their raid.
The home invaders enter a dark alley and suddenly cut their headlights. They disappear into the darkness, making it impossible to tell whether they parked or continued through the alley.
We're not panicking, but where the heck are they at? Where the heck are they at?
Police cannot move in for a closer look without potentially blowing their cover. If the home invaders get away, they will be free to commit another heinous crime. The FBI and Detroit police tail a gang of violent home invaders, hoping to catch them in the act. Authorities are anxious to bring closure to a 6-month investigation.
Here we go. I'll be cool. Yeah, just lay back here. Lay back here. Just be cool.
But when the home invaders cut their headlights, police lose them. Minutes later at the operations center, Detroit Detective Sergeant Tom Berry learns from 911 that the gang has struck again.
Home invasion just happened. 6 guys in mask dressed as police officers. They robbed the wrong house, got nothing out of it. We got 2 victims that are both almost 70 years old. Can't identify.
Since the home invaders did not steal anything, investigators decide not to make any arrests. There's simply no evidence to tie the gang to the crime.
We can't prove our case, so we sit and we wait.
Agents and officers scour the area looking for the home invaders. A Detroit police surveillance officer doubles back to the gang's meeting place, thinking they will return there after the invasion. When he arrives, he sees them coming out of the house, dressed in their raid clothes and getting into a van. It appears that the gang is heading out for another robbery. When gang members are dropped off at a house, Miller is right behind them.
I ducked into a nice little parking space where I could see the front of the house and I could see the van. I adjust my mirrors, you know, and get in my surveillance mode.
Finally, authorities are in position to actually see the home invaders commit a crime.
So the game plan was, they do the robbery, we can't stop it. If we go in, you risk hostages. We don't want hostages. We want nobody to get hurt.
Suddenly, Officer Miller notices the home invaders' van creeping up behind him.
My heart starts pounding, you know, I'm like, this guy saw me. I got my weapon in my hand, you know, and just in case anything happens, you know, I gotta be ready. He just cruised by me.
The van pulls up to the house.
These guys came running out, just all kind of stuff in their hands, and they all jumped into the van.
With a confirmed invasion, the task force puts their arrest plan into motion.
Now we're ready to go. Now we're going to take them down. We turn it over to the SWAT team.
An ambulance loaded with SWAT personnel approaches the gang's van and attempts to disable the vehicle by ramming it. But at the last second, the van speeds up and the ambulance cannot make a strong hit. The van, which has more horsepower, easily gets away from the SWAT team. FBI Special Agent Martin Vandervliet.
We obviously had a major problem. We had 6 highly armed individuals in a van, and we had to stop them.
Surveillance teams begin pursuing the van, knowing the chase will likely end in a gun battle. FBI Special Agent Bob Pertuso.
Whenever you have armed robbers running from the police, wearing bulletproof vests, armed with automatic weapons, once they broke through the attempts by the police to stop them, there was going to be a confrontation, absolutely.
Officer Miller and the other pursuit vehicles continue to chase the van through the streets of Detroit. Suddenly, the van's rear doors open and the gang begins shooting at law enforcement. A SWAT sniper inside one of the chase cars returns fire. At police headquarters, Officer Tom Dunai continues to monitor the chase.
It was amazing because of what had happened, how controlled the officers were in the street. There wasn't any panic, but people were screaming shots are being fired. We even heard gunfire over the radio. That's how strong it was. And in my heart, I was scared for the officers at that point.
Just stay with them.
The chase continues for several miles. Then, inexplicably, the van stops.
4 guys bail out the van. They're firing at me, and I jump out my car, and I fire one shot. I get one shot off with my 9mm, and it jammed. Natural instinct was just, these guys aren't getting away. Let me chase these guys.
SWAT officers order the remaining 2 home invaders to exit the van. But the van takes off, and the chase continues, leaving Miller alone to pursue the heavily armed suspects.
It was like I could feel the bullet going by. To this day, I can't explain to you why I didn't get shot. I say, okay, police, we got you surrounded, come out.
Miller thought other officers were following behind him. He suddenly realizes he's all alone.
And it's like a ghost town. I mean, nobody there.
Even worse, he does not know where his attacker has gone. The FBI and Detroit police engage in a running gun battle with a violent home invasion gang. Officer Steve Miller narrowly escapes an ambush. When backup arrives, Miller begins searching for his attacker.
We start going up eastbound on Pasadena, just checking. Sure enough, get about 5 houses up, and this guy is laying face down. So I'm like, okay, get up, get up. And, he wasn't moving, kind of lifeless, so I reached around the field, to see if I could get a pulse from him.
He's dead. He's dead.
He's later identified as Obie Carter, the gang's leader. A subsequent autopsy concludes that Officer Miller's first shot, an armor-piercing round, punctured Carter's bulletproof vest and fatally wounded him. Miles away, the police chase comes to an abrupt end when the gang's van breaks down. The two remaining home invaders jump out of the van. One surrenders, but the other will not go down without a fight. FBI agents pursue the fleeing gunman. Searching down a dark alley, Special Agent Bob Pertuso sees a dark shape and carefully approaches.
The getaway driver was lying on the ground. He had been shot a number of times.
The agents call for an ambulance. The getaway driver is taken to a hospital and, against all odds, survives. Following a series of fierce gun battles, the task force assesses the casualties. Hundreds of shots were fired. Incredibly, no one on the arrest team was hit.
Our plan worked.
Unknown or injured.
Did not anticipate the high-speed chase and the violent confrontation, but it happened. It was dealt with effectively.
But only 3 of the 6 gang members involved in the chase have been apprehended. Detroit police officer Tom Dunai tries to locate them.
Detective Barry here.
What I had done was call local hospitals to find out if anybody was admitted with a gunshot wound. And we called around a few hospitals. We had a hit at one hospital, and they says, oh yeah, somebody just came in with multiple gunshot wounds.
At the hospital, Dunai confirms the gunshot victim is one of the fugitives. As the search for the remaining 2 gang members continues, FBI agents, the FBI SWAT team, and local police serve search warrants on 6 of the gang members' houses. They find critical evidence, according to FBI Special Agent Martin Vandervliet.
Well, we found a lot of evidence that had been taken from robberies, including specific items of clothing, jewelry, and then we also recovered a great amount of weapons. A lot of the houses would have 3 to 5 guns in them, as well as ammunition, vests, pry bars, masks, and other things.
At Detroit Police Headquarters, Detective Sergeant Tom Berry questions the captured members of the home invasion gang. He lets them know they are facing long prison terms and that those who cooperate first may get reduced sentences.
Probably 95% of them told us exactly what happened. That's how we were able to identify the rest of the gang, the rest of the peripheral players.
Over the following months, the task force systematically arrests gang members. In the end, a total of 29 are convicted and sentenced on federal or state charges in the biggest home invasion prosecution to date.
This particular task force, it was the first major task force between the FBI and the Detroit Police Department. We wanted to do a good job for those victims. We made a difference. We really made a difference to the city of Detroit. We did make it a safer place.
Well, it just goes to show you that when law enforcement agencies can work together smoothly with the right people, anything can be accomplished.
Thanks to the collaborative efforts of the Detroit Police Department and the FBI, the violent home invaders gang is dismantled forever.